So I'm recording a video now outside. I really hope there's not too much background noise. I hope that you can hear me and that it goes smoothly. And I hope that this holds the phone up in the correct position. Okay, so we're now continuing with the 613 mitzvos from the Torah. And if I do get interrupted, I'll have to pause the video and start again. So number 420, to be seen at the temple at Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot. So no matter where you live, you have to make, this is applying to the men, you have to schedule your year accordingly. Passover is in Nisan, which is like the Aries, so Shavuos is 7 weeks after the second day of Passover. These are the three main holidays. They're called Shalosh Regalim, the 3 foot trips. The free Regalim means like the pilgrimage by foot, and Sukkot. So there's a fall, a spring, and a summer sort of. 7 weeks after the spring one is the summer one, and the fall one is before the winter. Then these holidays have different meanings, not just because of the season. You have they're often referred to by the season, but you have Passover being the Exodus from Egypt, Shavuos being the time of giving of the Torah, and Sukkot being a commemoration of being protected in the desert for 40 years. It's a special. Each of these holidays are Passover and Sukkot are 8 days, really 7 plus 1, and Shavuos is 2 days outside the diaspora. I don't remember if it's 1 day in Israel. Okay, 421, to celebrate on these festivals, these 3, to bring a peace offering, to rejoice on these festivals, and not to appear at the temple without an offering, not to refrain from rejoicing and giving gifts to the Levites, to assemble all the people on Sukkot following the 7th year. This is literally all the people, and we're talking about the men here, appearing. It's called a Hakel. So the 8th year, every 7th year we've mentioned in previous videos, and is a sabbatical year. It's called a Shemitah in Hebrew. The 8th year is called a Hakel. It's the assembly year. So 7th year, you let the land lie rest, and debts are canceled out, and a lot of other things. And then the 8th year is the assembly year. Okay, to set aside firstborn animals. The priest must not eat unblemished firstborn animals outside Jerusalem. Not to redeem the firstborn animal. To separate, redeem means you keep the animal and give the value. To separate the tithe from the animals, a tenth. Tithe is a tenth. Not to redeem the firstborn animal. I thought I did that one already. Or maybe not to redeem the tenth, the tithe. Every person must bring a sin offering for his transgression. Bring a guilt, or every person must bring a guilt offering in the case of doubt. Bring a guilt offering for certain specified transgressions. Bring an offering of varying status for certain specified transgressions. If the person's wealthy, an animal. If poor, a bird or meal offering. The Sanhedrin, the court, must bring a sin offering when it rules in error. A woman who had a running, like a vaginal issue meaning something coming out of her, must bring an offering in the temple after she goes to the purification bath, which is a mikvah. A woman who gave birth must bring an offering in the temple after she goes to the mikvah. A man who had a running unnatural issue, like coming out of him like basically like a discharge, must bring an offering in the temple after a mikvah. A mitzora, which is somebody who got tsaras. We translate it as leprosy, but it's really not. It's a spiritual illness. It's like these white spots or these red spots or even other colors, and they could be on the skin or on the house walls or on the head. And there's like different rules. You really have to know all the rules. It's the same thing, but it appears in all different ways. You would say like, oh no, that's one illness, that's another illness. The doctors, they say, well, if it appears red, if it appears pink, if it appears splotchy, if it appears like boils, like there's all these different rules for it. Not boils, but like a red outside and a different color inside. But actually, the priest used to be like a spiritual doctor. The priest is able to say whether it's pure or not, and it's able to be. I just saw someone I didn't want to see. Like a spiritual doctor, so is able to say whether or not it's pure. Then, okay, continuing. So the priest knows once, so after he's pure, he goes into the mikvah, he's immersed. He then, so after he goes to the mikvah, this man who was considered Mitzvah, or the woman, there's a whole procedure. But after she or he is finished being a Mitzvah and is pronounced pure by the Kohen, it's like, oh, you're clean, you're sterile now. Not sterile, you're like, you're no longer sick, right? You're cured. So after the priest does so, and it could be a drawn-out process if necessary, must bring an offering in the temple after going to the mikvah. The mikvah is the immersion. Not to substitute another beast for one set apart for a sacrifice. The new animal, in addition to the substituted animal, retains consecration, which means they're specifically reserved for the temple offering. Not to change consecrated animals from one type to another, to carry out the laws of impurity of the dead, to carry out the procedure of the red heifer, which is also in Hebrew called the paraduma, the red cow. Carry out the laws of the sprinkling water. This is with the ashes and the hyssop. To rule the laws of the human Mitzvah, which we just talked about, as described by the Torah. The Mitzvah must not remove his signs of impurity. Some examples are shaving the head, going outside the camp. The Mitzvah must not shave the hair around his bald spot. The Mitzvah must, because I mentioned that the Kohen will tell him certain things to do. The Mitzvah must publicize his condition by tearing his garments, allowing his hair to grow, and covering his lips. The Mitzvah must carry out the prescribed rules for puring. We're commanded to carry out the prescribed rules for purifying the Mitzvah. As mentioned, the Mitzvah is there's a few different comments about what causes someone to get it. Sometimes the go-to answer is when you speak about matzei ra, like what came out was bad, and that's often related to the speech. So the Mitzvah here, motzei ra, means something bad came out. We talk about it as bad speech, impure speech. Someone gets afflicted. We could also say that it's actually an idea of this, like something. Like sometimes we say like that when someone's healing, the toxins come out. So it could be that it's like a deep healing he's going through on the inside. Something bad is coming out. So he has to be separated from everyone, but it doesn't mean he's bad or he's being punished. It means that he's actually going through a deeper purity. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe says it's actually somebody who's going to a higher level will go through this process sometimes. But anyway, we could, there's, they say there's 70 opinions to the Torah. We could probably come up with 70 different possibilities of what this could mean, why it happens. The Torah, okay. The Mitzvah must shave all his hair prior to purification, and we have to carry out the laws of the tzaras of the clothing. It could happen on the clothing, could happen on the possessions, and also we have to carry out the laws of the tzaras of the houses. As mentioned, it could happen in the walls. We have to observe the laws of impurity when it comes to menstruation and childbirth, and by a woman's running issue, a discharge, and caused by a man's discharge, that's irregular ejaculation of infected semen, and caused by a dead beast, caused by the 8 shratzim, which are like, sheretz means disgusting. There's like things that are considered really like gross, like we would say like insects, other crawling things on their belly. Also the impurity of irregular seminal emission, the impurity of concerning liquid and solid foods, which has to do with the vessels and things. And every impure person must immerse himself in a mikveh to become pure. We are commanded to act according to the ruling of the Sanhedrin, which is the court. We are commanded not to testify falsely and to punish the false witness the way that they tried to punish the defendant. This is the idea of an eye for an eye, really, which is that, not really, but what do I mean by that? I mean, this is the idea that if you were wishing for someone to suffer and they didn't even do the thing wrong that you're accusing of them, we're commanded to do that. Like, let's say the procedure would have been that they have to be killed. So now, when we find out they testified falsely, we actually say they should get killed, not the one who they were trying to falsely testify. Not to like, let's say they said, oh, she cheated on her husband, and it was a lie, and let's say there's a certain punishment for that. That's going to be what they deserve. Okay. Moral laws is not to deviate from the word of the Sanhedrin, the court, not to add to the Torah the commandments or the oral explanations that have been established, not to diminish from the Torah's commandments in whole or in part. And the court has to judge the damages incurred by a goring ox, or by an animal that was eating, or by a pit. An animal eating means someone else's property, someone else's land. A pit that the damages incurred, or by a fire. We are commanded not to steal money stealthily, and that the court must implement punitive measures against the thief. I think I wrote sheep, but Each individual must ensure his scales and weights are accurate. We should not commit injustice with scales and weights. We shouldn't even possess inaccurate scales or weights, even if they're not to be used. We should not move a boundary marker to steal someone else's property, like the edge of something, we move it. We shouldn't kidnap or rob openly or withhold wages or fail to repay a debt. We shouldn't covert a scheme to acquire another's possessions. We shouldn't even desire another's possessions. And that's the idea here, is that if it was meant to be ours, it would be, or it will be eventually, but we should not desire something that belongs to someone else. We should return a robbed object or its value. We should not ignore a lost object. We should return a lost object. The court must implement laws against the one who assaults another or damages another's property. There's a law not to murder and not to accept monetary restitution to atone for a murderer. The court must send the accidental murderer to a city of refuge and not accept monetary restitution instead of being sent to a city of refuge when it's an accidental murder. Not to kill the murderer before he stands trial. To save someone who's being pursued even by taking the life of the pursuer. Not to pity the pursuer. Not to stand idly by if someone's life is in danger. To designate cities of refuge and prepare the routes of access. To break the neck of the calf by the river valley following an unsolved murder. This is something very specific where if there's someone who was on the way and they were killed, they measure between two cities and they break the neck of a calf over there, and there's a procedure there, and it's basically because they say they must have not given him proper escort, proper food, proper water in the right way. This is when they don't know who did it. Not to work nor plant that river valley where they did the procedure. Not to allow pitfalls or okay, I think it's time to finish. Not to allow pitfalls or obstacles to remain in your property. To make a guardrail around all flat roofs. And not to put a stumbling block before a blind person, which includes giving harmful advice.